Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. That's what's happening. We're updating your computer. Don't power off your devices.
Every time they say that, I'm like, but what would happen if I did?
Glorious retribution. Oh, good. It's taking forever. It's only at 4%.
That is super fun. I
We
live,
are
laugh,
gonna
love
have
that
a
for you.
great time. Gonna talk about games. Gonna talk about tabletop role playing games with Jesse and Maddie. The gang's all here. And if you're not ready, go fuck yourself. We're at 6%. The Jaunty Mantis is happening right now at 7%, 8%, back down to 7%. Ready?
Yeah.
Welcome, and well met to the Jaunty Mantis. And this is a podcast about tabletop role playing games where creative gamers ask curious questions, or maybe curious gamers ask creative questions. I'm one of your co hosts, Maddie, and I have with me my beautiful co host, Jesse.
How's it going, y'all?
How's it going indeed? And on each episode of the Jaunty Mantis, we try to ask a question. And sometimes when we do seasons, we theme the seasons. And this theme of this season, season 3, is book reviews.
I got a question.
Okay, what is it?
What fate does the forest hold for you?
That's great. I don't know. We're about to find out. That beats my question, which I was going to ask to you, Jesse.
What's that question?
Why would somebody want to play a role playing game when you know you're going to die?
Because it's cool.
Well, we were going to get more into that. We are reviewing Trophy Dark in this episode of the Jaunty Mantis. And as always, we have our book review flow. Jesse has a physical copy of it that he is flashing across the screen. And we are going to briefly overview Trophy Dark. We are going to talk about why it matters. We're going to talk about what you do in this game, why it's cool, and we are going to each mention an aha moment if such exists. Jesse, do us the honors of giving an overview of Trophy Dark.
Trophy Dark. The question I asked you at the beginning is from the back of Trophy Dark. Is a death spiral game.
Mm-hmm.
You go into it knowing that your characters are going to if not die, then be drastically changed to being something no longer really human. um and yeah, it's a very narrative based game, kind of built on a sort of stripped down, powered by the apocalypse sort of conflict resolution set. And I really like it. I don't know. What am I missing? It's got an implied setting of
Mm-hmm.
the forest. It's super moody and atmospheric. Um, it's got one of the better use of content warnings
Mm-hmm.
on some of the incursions, because some of the shit that happens in them is like pretty legitimately horrific.
Right. And it also makes a great use of contributors. That's one of my favorite things about this book is once you get to the incursions part, it has several different scenarios for its incursions for you to play out. There's a bunch of them, and each one is written by a different person. You really do get a feel for that author's individual voice and creativity over the course of the write-ups for those incursions, which I think was part of my favorite thing about this book, but not necessarily an aha moment. So, Jesse, I'm going to repeat my question. Why would you play a Death Spiral game? Like, usually when we think of role playing games, obviously we think of Dungeons and Dragons. And in Dungeons and Dragons, people, not including us, we've said this before many times, we're not super particular about our characters. Jesse and I fit into this category where we love our characters. We want to explore things with our characters, but if they die, that's totally cool. We're fine with that. We may be a little bit bummed, worst case scenario, but other people are like super precious about their characters. And so this game seems kind of counterintuitive to that base concept that most people find in role playing games.
Yeah, I think one of the things too to think about Trophy Dark, and for comparison, I do have another trophy game on the shelf called Trophy Gold, which is designed to be more like the same story-based mechanics, but feel more basic expert dungeon crawly. Like you're not guaranteed to die, but still on the table in that one.
Hmm.
This one, I think the way they lay it out does a pretty good job of explaining it, is that this is telling the end of these people's stories. And
Hmm.
I think if you're up for that, it's kind of interesting to see what the end is like, because that's not an experience we usually get to have in role-playing games. And when the end comes in a role-playing game, a lot of times it's very shocking and surprising. Um, but yeah, the goal of this one is not to have adventures as your character and to solve puzzles using your character as your proxy in the world. The goal in this one is to tell a story, a horror story.
Hmm. And there
And
isn't really a lot of longevity to the character concept. So this seems like, to me, just reading it, because I haven't played it, um, it seems like to me this is a very like one shot oriented game.
I'd say two shot, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it
So
is. This is specifically designed to not have long term, to not, this one's not for long term play. There's
yeah.
no like character progression rules or like
Hmm.
anything like
And
that. You're gonna die,
the
or
part
become
you're
a monster.
the part you're leaving out is that this is heavily influenced by the OSR, and I
Yes.
and it's another Jesse OSR pick. Go ahead and drink or mark off your bingo card or whatever it is you're doing at home while you listen to this. But yes, it's heavily influenced by the OSR, and the people behind this. I recognize Jason Cordova's name on this as the publisher. Um, and I know that name because of Discern Realities, the podcast that he did, the actual play and content creation and review podcast around Dungeon World. Um, and go ahead. The other, let us know what was the other one? What was the one you were recommending on our podcast episode?
Oh yeah, it's actually how I got into this because like I remember seeing the Kickstarter for this when it came out and being like, why are there three different books? Oh, well, the cover looks cool, but I don't know much about it. And so it was actually a Kickstarter that I slept on. And then I started listening to Fear of a Black Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept mentioning that in that podcast they cover like OSR, old school adventure modules or books for the old school, and they have these segments, and one of them is the expert delve, which is like what other systems or what would you do to run this, and one was like, oh well, if I was doing this in Trophy Dark I'd do this, and I'm like, well, that sounds cool. So then I
Mm-hmm.
found an actual play of Trophy Dark on the Gauntlet, and I was like, oh damn, why did I sleep on this Kickstarter?
Yeah, and a big component of the OSR is the lethality of it, the dark and disturbing overtones and thematic elements to the OSR. And this game is just like, hey, all of that shit is here, and we are going to double, triple, and quadruple down on it. And that's the point.
Yeah, but you come into it like being told by the book, being told by the GM full on, like, hey, this is a death spiral game.
Hmm.
Your character's gonna die. This is not like this is to tell the story of how your character dies or how what their end is. They're
Hmm.
desperate people pushed to do the desperate thing and it doesn't go well for them. Um, and as long as you're all on board for that, we actually did the first half of a game campaign with my one of my in-person groups, and it was great.
Hmm.
It
I
was
think that,
the
go ahead.
it was the Wicker Man, but the ocean
Uh
one.
huh. Hmm.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to why this matters for me, which granted, this is some low hanging fruit, but I think it bears mentioning. The reason I love Trophy Dark, I granted I read it a month ago at the time of this recording. Um, However, I was reading it on an airplane and I just couldn't put it down. It was amazing to get through this book. But the why it matters for me is that role-playing games can be so much more than what we know of them. And I think that is a distant, beautiful future on the horizon for role playing games. And I think as long as we start experimenting like with what is a role playing game, what are different types of role playing games, and saying this is a death spiral role playing game. This is not your typical Dungeons and Dragons style experience. It's something different. And I think that's why it matters.
Yep. For me, the why it matters is the layout of the incursions. And so, one of the things I need to talk about on this one is like they don't call them adventures, they call them
Hmm.
incursions because you are basically like not welcome in the forest.
Hmm.
As a human that goes about on two legs, you're not welcome there at all. Um, and that sort of made me think as I was rereading this about the Walking Woods from Pangea and be like,
Hmm.
trophy Pangea crossover. Uh, really lean into the horror elements.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
awesome.
to me, the why it matters is like the way the incursions are laid out. There's a number of rings that you pass through, and each ring has terrors to like make it harder and scary and temptations. And as you progress through the rings, which are very clearly chapterized sections of play, those ramp up uh, in a way that makes you say that escalated quickly. uh, yeah, it's just like an incursion is typically like 4 pages.
Hmm.
And I just think like that's everything you need to run this game. A couple questions to ask, an example of a question, because you do a lot of question asking in this game, like all good powered by the apocalypse games. Like you throw a question out to the PCs and then just run with the answer. It's really a shared storytelling experience.
Hmm.
Um, I just
What
love it.
what's an example of a question that you would find either you would ask or would get asked in a Trophy Dark game?
Um, let's see. Here, let me find a good one. Okay, the third ring, which is the halfway point of Retribution Tree by Sabine V. Theme Tree, warnings, body horror, graphic violence, human sacrifice, mannequins, manipulation, pregnancy. So something light. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, no, ring two. Terrors. The strong winds bluster through the forest, breaking branches and toppling trees. The path is winding, making it difficult to predict the direction of each gust. It's almost as if the storm is hurting the treasure hunters. Branches fall in front of them, diverting their path. A loud nearby crack announces the falling of a tree, and then another, and then another. When the treasure hunters try to escape the cascade, roots grasp at their feet to trip them. Question to ask the PCs. What about your own roots made you stumble, fall behind, or hesitate in the past?
Hmm.
What wrong did you commit that warrants being called out by the forest?
Hmm. So let me ask you this then. What kind of like let's say you're running a Trophy Dark game and you've asked these questions. How does a player's response then guide you towards running this game and continuing the incursion?
Oh, you incorporate what they said. Like you know, like this. Okay, that's your root in the past. Just I mean, like some of those are just character focused development questions to make you know
Hmm.
who this person is that's about to die.
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, you would just then incorporate it maybe in like if they get some like oh what is it called? Taint, rot, darkness.
All good
uh
things.
as the forest changes you, because that's another thing that ruin, it's called ruin. As your ruin increases, you change in physical ways. Um there's actually a
Hmm.
little table in each one. Like the flocculent cathedral. uh, has some conditions. Colors wash out, and everything has a patina of dull green. Anything already green looks verdant, almost glowing. So that's just the way the character sees the world now.
Hmm.
Your clothing and armor sprout a coat of reddish tendrils, soft to the touch and swaying in an unseen breeze. Ugh.
I think the best part about the questions, um, kind of harkens back to the first time someone ran Dungeon World for me. For a bunch of us, it was at a Gen Con. It was at that it's been forever since I've been there, but there's a sectioned off part from the main area where you can basically purchase like passes to
Go
then
indie games done quick.
that's what it is. Yes. Thanks. I completely blanked on all the other details.
That's like the only thing I want to do at Gen Con when I go now.
It's so much fun. Uh, you basically just purchase the passes, and then when there's a game you want to get at, you sign up for it, use the passes you purchased for, and then if there's not that many of you, you're sitting down with strangers, or you can sit down as a group. But then you get to play a cool indie game, and there's a bunch of them running, and they go for like what, an hour or so until
It's
you
like
switch.
2 hours.
Is it two? It goes by
Yep.
so fast. But so we played Dungeon World, and what the GM did for that was, in order to get us rolling real quickly, they started asking us a bunch of questions, and certain kinds of questions were like, okay, well, there was this there was this moment in this past, a great sundering. It was caused by an evil entity. What was that evil entity? And somebody would be like, oh, it was a wizard. It was like, okay, it was a wizard. What did they do? Was it a spell that they cast? Was it a curse? Did they summon something? And so those were the basic questions that got us in the mode. And then that person was basically using the stuff that we answered those questions with, and then started seeding the adventure with all of those things. And that was a game changing moment for me. Because I bought Dungeon World after playing it and read that book cover to cover.
Didn't
And
didn't the guy that ran that game for us have a Dungeon World podcast or something?
he might have. Yeah, I know he was trying to record it, but there was so much noise in the room. We should try to find that someday. But the point I'm trying to make is that this game also had the same effect on me as playing Dungeon World, where it really does illustrate how important it is to ask questions, because your players will give you the best material possible as long as you get those creative juices flowing.
Does I forget, does Dungeon World have a devil's bargain mechanic?
Not that I know of. What is a devil's bargain mechanic? What would
So
it
that
look
might
like?
be more forged in the dark. So the devil's bargain mechanic is basically like you can get an extra die to roll towards this. Oh no, it wouldn't because it's always 2d6 with Dungeon World.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, with the forged in the dark games or like trophy, it's the number of dice you roll looking for hits
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like what number on 2d6. Um and so you can get a devil's bargain that's just like I'll give you an extra dice for this, but the situation's going to worsen in some way if you accept it. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can accept the devil's bargain or not. And this game really encourages you to be like, when someone's going to try something, to be like anybody got a good devil's bargain for this if you can't think of anything, which is the one thing I didn't really do when I was running the game that I wish I would have
Mm-hmm.
more, is because you're asking people to bring those complications, and the more you do it, I think it more it creates that. And coupled with the questions that are in the incursion, you can repurpose them, but I think a lot of them are really what elevates this game to being more than just a death spiral game,
Mm-hmm.
because those questions get people reflecting on the actual, like, who this fictional person they're playing is, and it really kind of gives some heft to their inevitable end.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it makes it matter in a way that I
Mm-hmm.
find like a really compelling experience of play.
Yeah. The forest is going to mess with you, and your player characters giving you trauma and answers through the questions you've asked them is going to help you do that in the game for sure. For sure. So we want to talk about the mechanics. I know you're a mechanics guy. So what is unique about Trophy Dark mechanics wise? I know character creation is done randomly.
Yeah, random. And this is actually well, let's do what do you do? I mean, the mechanics are basically like it's a dice pool. Um There's actually like one little sidebar that explains the entire mechanics of the game, which I'm like, well, that's great. Uh, let's see. Yeah, risk rolls are basically the entirety of the mechanics.
Okay.
So to roll a risk, you basically gather your dice pool. You have light die and dark dice. If it's something that you're skilled at because of your occupation or your background, you get a light die. If you accept the devil's bargain, you get a light die. And if you're risking your mind and body, you take a dark die. Um, and then you roll all the dice. Um, and if the dark die is equal or higher to the highest dice in your roll, you take ruin. Um, and if not, are you willing to risk your body or mind for a better result? If yes,
Mm-hmm.
re-roll. And then you read the highest die. On a 1 to 3, you fail and things get worse. On a 4 or 5, you succeed, but there's a complication. Um, the GM describes a complication, and then you describe how you succeed, or vice versa. Or on a 6, you succeed. Describe how, or ask the GM.
Gotcha.
So that's it. Devil's bargains. Some examples from the book are causing collateral damage or unintended harm, getting lost or separated from your companions. You sacrifice an item or piece of treasure. You betray a fellow treasure hunter, or you attract unwanted attention. Just for starters, on what a devil's bargain can be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I should mention too that you probably want to prep your players for is this game can get into PvP.
Oh, okay.
It's like not the goal, but as things grow increasingly chaotic and desperate and you're changed by the forest, like you might go after another PC because the story has convinced you that they betrayed you.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Like you don't just die, you can become one of the monsters. Another thing too is the monsters, it straight up says if you fight the monsters with the intention of defeating the monsters, you die.
Mm-hmm.
The monsters are too powerful for you to beat. Complications, you can like make a risk roll to like attack the monster to knock it off balance and get by it, but if you're just going straight for killing it, you lose.
Yeah. And the deeper you get in, the tougher things are. Because in that first ring, I think you could take a scuffle with like bandits or whatever.
Well, the bandits aren't a monster, so like
Okay.
you could totally like knife some bandits, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
When the forest animates their corpse with writhing vines and insects, and those corpses come crashing through the underbrush while you're trying to sleep, those you can't fight.
Right. Gotcha. Well, so do we need to talk about why it's cool? Because I feel like we kind of covered that already, but it's cool to play a death metal, dark metal role playing game. This is a game you would play with sun going on in the background with, or some sort of doom ambient doom metal.
Yeah, this is definitely an ambient doom metal game. It's like which metal are the different OSR games that we've covered? Like
Mm-hmm.
Troika is prog metal.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I don't know. Trophy Dark is just like ambient doom,
Yeah.
slow core. Like,
Do you have any specific why it's cool things you wanted to add or
this kind of blends into my aha moment. I mean,
okay.
it's cool because it's little. It's cool because it has a whole bunch of like different incursions in it. It's cool because it's just stylish as hell. It's cool
Mm-hmm.
because there's like two other books. One of them is just setting, like Trophy Loom is just setting stuff, is just like random tables. And one of the most terrifying ones, and this is sorry, I'm going to call this part of Trophy just in general. Feyborn. The Fey are creatures, elves, dwarves, and trolls and their kin, which live in the heart of the forest and across the veil in their own mysterious world. For some invisible reason, they secret themselves into the mortal world to abduct newborn babes and leave behind Feyborn, mimics who wear a mask to make themselves look just like the replaced children. And then there's a table. What's behind the mask of the Feyborn? And then, yeah, let's say you roll a 26 on that table. What's behind the mask of the Feyborn? Woolly green moss crawling with beetles.
Wonderful.
Hundreds of tiny rodent teeth.
Oof.
So that's why it's cool.
I think it's also cool because this is really the essence of like old school fairy tales or fables in a role playing game. You know, there's so many of those like old country myths and fairy tales where it was like, man, this is some really dark shit.
Yeah, this is Grimm's Hansel and Gretel, like the
Yeah,
original.
right. Exactly. It's a perfect way to put it, right? Like picture yourself as those characters. You're not coming out of this
Yep.
alive. You know, like let's go through some of the other incursions just to give the audience like an idea of the differing or varying types of options.
Okay. Um, I have a couple favorites.
Okay, let's hear them.
Let me just find it. Because there's oh yes, mother.
Uh-huh.
Theme, labor, warnings, amputation, body horror, confined spaces, graphic violence, harm to children, heights, pregnancy, slavery, suffocation.
Mm-hmm.
The intro to this one is if you ask any experienced treasure hunter to name the most terrifying thing in the forest, there's always one location that comes up more often than not. It goes by many names. The fall, the well, the quarry. Despite its names, it's always described the same way. Questions. One of the following gives you a strange comfort: the steady rhythm, the warmth of the earth, the tight space. Why? Little details to throw in at the bottom of the page. Your shoulder brushes against the clay, leaving a blood red smear. Twisting and straining of your the twisting and straining of your rappelling rope, your lifeline. Yeah, these are impressions. This is the other thing we forgot to mention about the incursions. The impressions down at the bottom. Where's the
Hmm.
horrific pig one? Um, there's the one with bees, a warm and pleasant hum.
Yep. Fucking bees.
Clever fingers, throne of the forest queen, to make my bread. This is a giant
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yep. This one is my favorite. Go ahead.
I'm slipping past to make my bread. I'm just trying to find. Gift of the Sea is the one that I played. It's like Wicker Man in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
The Flocculent Cathedral is horrifying. They're all horrifying. I guess it's
Yeah.
Blackberry Jam, The Penitent's Path,
Forest of Blades.
Regicide. That Silent Howl, The Pit, The Spiral, Retribution Tree I was just looking at, The Plantation.
Mm.
The Plantation, who the image for this one is a boar person holding a massive bloody cleaver kind of looming out of the shadows. Theme, hunger. Warnings, body horror, cannibalism, graphic violence, harm to animals, starvation. Deep within that blighted land which the vengeful wood has reclaimed lies the abandoned manses and forgotten manors of wealthy landowners and foppish nobles, built in hubristic defiance of the old forest. Tales spread among the borderlands that one such manor, a lavish plantation atop sweeping hills that overlooked terrace fields, where before the spirits of old Cawdor reclaimed what was theirs, indolent lords and ladies gorged themselves on progressively rarer and more esoteric delicacies to sate their endless hunger, eventually consuming their servants and even each other in orgiastic cannibal gluttony.
Mm-hmm.
Nobles are gone now. They fled the butcher's knives of their comrades and the vengeful cleavers of their would-be meals. Only the accumulated wealth of all the region's nobility remains, hidden away under peeling floorboards and dusty cellars, just waiting for an enterprising treasure hunter hungry enough to find it. Guess what happens?
I can't stress this enough. I know I mentioned it before, but the fact that each one of these is written by different people, all these different incursions really does, the voices of these writers really does come out in a very small amount of space. And it
Yeah.
really just adds to the overall quality of the product. Like it really does make it special.
Terrors. I'm just going to read you the terrors from this one because this is my one of my personal favorites. On the far edge of the once manicured grounds, the treasure hunters encounter a party of time-worn noblemen and women, garbed in shredded, gore-encrusted, and mud-smeared finery. They are hunched over a bloated, fly-shrouded corpse of a massive pig. The nobles stuff handfuls of raw meat, viscera, and entrails into their mouths full of rotting teeth, heedless of the blood and other effluvium that spatters their painted faces and powdered wigs. Their necks, wrists, and waists are bedecked with jewelry of gold and precious stones, and their pockets and undershirts are stuffed to spilling with coins and gems. What treasures from the nobles do you take, and how do you hide them from the others?
Yes.
Here's some impressions. The most delicious smells waft past your nostrils, but are gone a moment later. A pack of starving feral hounds snarl and snap over a bone. A keening wail is heard from overhead as a lone vulture circles. Pained screams of animals being dragged to the butcher's block. Some sound human. A rat scurries across your feet. It flops over and bursts open, writhing with maggots. Blood leaks from broken barrels. Inside are flayed skins packed with salt.
Gross.
Yikes!
Yep.
So yeah, that was, by the way, impressions for the fifth ring, the
Hmm.
fifth ring of the incursion, which is the inn.
Hmm. Yeah. This game is fucking awesome. Um, what's your aha moment? Did we cover that already?
So yeah, I actually think my moment is the thing that prepped me to later read Troika and have an entirely different reaction than you,
Yeah.
which is, because this will chronologically, we just there'll be some space in between this and the Troika episode which just came out.
Hmm.
But yeah, let me find this. There's this one little box that's with the backgrounds. What does this mean? Many of the occupations, backgrounds, and drives refer to individuals, events, locations, and identities that are not fully explained. What is a beast bitten or a fey born? Is a snake a smooth talking charlatan or a literal serpent person? What happens at Countess Shimma's forbidden festival? Who is Cyrus, and why do you need to take their place at the Earthen Council? What even is the Earthen Council? A player who selects one of these options should feel free to make up an explanation for them either during character creation or during the course of the game.
Hmm.
There you go. If Troika had had that,
Yes. Yes. I completely agree.
if it had told you what to do with that random information like that, you
Hmm.
would have had an entirely different experience. And
Yeah.
I had had that in mind as a principle for what a game can do because I read Trophy before I read Troika.
Hmm.
That was my aha moment.
Right. I think, I think my reaction to Troika would be what it is no matter what, but I could easily see that being adjusted if you had read Trophy Dark first. My aha moment comes from the section. Let's see, where is it? I mean, okay, so my aha moments come in two parts. One is the incursions themselves. After I read through all the incursions on this flight, on this when I read this book on that flight, it made me start to think about role playing games differently in the sense of like how I want to run them and how I plan for them. And we'll go back to something you said because I said this seems like this is like a one shot or a one session style game, and you said 2 sessions, so we'll go with that. It makes me want to plan for games in any role playing game that I'm running in 2 sessions. Like, let's just get straight to the point of like what this game is and what we want to happen in it and plan for it to be in these 2 session chunks. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah, the reason I think it works for 2 sessions is you probably want to spend like maybe 30 minutes on ring one, but after that, each ring should be about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a good target to spend about an hour in each of the circles or each ring of the incursion as you progress, and they all have like five.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, to me, if you're playing for like a 2.5 or a 3 hour session, you do character creation ring one and ring two the first session, get
Mm-hmm.
to the switch between ring two and three, and then pause, and then next session ring three, four, and then the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it made me start thinking of games that aren't Death Spiral to be summed up in basically 2 sessions. Like, and beyond character creation, let's say you're playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e, the characters are already created. Like when I plan for an adventure, like I have this larger picture of the adventure in mind, and I have these milestones or these steps or these things that like where I'm going to take the player characters with full knowledge that they could, split from that at any moment, and I'll just roll with it. And early days of this podcast, I had said stuff like, I wonder what it would like be like to put um player characters on more of a track, or I was jokingly calling it like completely doing it on the rails style game. And I think the aha moment with this for me is that I was like, what if I just planned those games to be 2 sessions? You know what I mean? Like instead of imagining this massive overall story, be like, no, this is for 2 sessions. What do I want to get done in 2 sessions? Because if you're anything like me, listener, you want to plan for everything. You think about all different aspects. You've got a grand story in mind. And then when you actually sit down and play it, like your player characters surprise you, and they have all sorts of different impressions and ideas, and if you can jump on that while it's happening, like all, more power to you. But it really made me just look at it and be like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm big surprise. I'm over planning. I'm doing too much work. Why don't I just plan for 2 sessions? What's the thing I want to do? How do I do it in 2 sessions? And then once we're done with that, plan for another 2 sessions. So I think that's what the main aha moment was for me. And then the design of the incursions themselves is something I want to change the way I plan for my actual. I want questions, I want conditions, I want those prompts. It's like I would just like I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but like when I run games, I leave a lot of that for the moment. I'll make notes and I'll add details like we talked about in a um past episodes. Like I don't like pre-written adventures. I think pre-written adventures should have, you know, what we aspects or prompts or whatever the case may be. And I think this is the exception to pre-written adventures or these incursions as in this book. And if pre-written adventures were more in this kind of style, like I'd be all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these are, I mean, they're outlines. There's not a ton of like, not a ton of read through text, not a ton of like maps. There's no
Mm-hmm.
maps really. There are no maps in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's an outline. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I'd love to start outlining my adventures like this.
I think one of the things too, I did it for a while and I fell away from it, and it's one of the influences with these questions. And it's one of those things I think it's really helpful to remember as a DM. And I think running a game of trophy for your friends would help you drive this home the same way we talked in the past about Powered by the Apocalypse games like Dungeon World or Powered by the Apocalypse itself. Is like as a DM, you're a player too, and if you're leaning into that play to find out, like if you are curious about something, it's okay to just ask the player at the table, how do you feel about this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does your character feel about this thing that's just happened to him? Or
Mm-hmm.
what in your past, in your character's past, does this remind you of? Like, that's actually a really good practice.
Mm-hmm.
It centers the player, it helps with role play, it makes everyone feel really invested, it gives people creative license in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just, yeah, it's one of those things. Run and trophy would help you return best principles. The other thing I thought that was interesting about this is when I listened to the actual plays, Jason Cordova, like running this game, uses a lot of the language of film.
Right.
Like the camera cuts away or the
Right.
camera pans over the forest tops and we see, and I don't do that. I'm not sure I like it, but I want to try it to see if
Mm-hmm.
or make up my mind.
I know what you mean because if he didn't do that in Discern Realities, he was doing something similar. So I feel like I have an idea. If you've ever wanted to get an example of how to play Dungeon World, Discern Realities is amazing. But um, yeah, I know what you mean. I've never done that either. I feel like, for maybe a future season, we could even do, different GM styles. And that would be one that I would like the cinematic style. And what does that mean? And who's doing it best? And, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just like, I'm very thankful for games like Trophy Dark, because they push me outside of my comfort zone, not just thematically, but also what does it mean? Like you think you've been doing this most of your life, you think you know how to do it very well, or you're like me and you think you suck at it and you're you're always trying to improve. But it's nice to have a book like this that shows you that there are different ways to do things.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on Trophy Dark?
I really want to play it.
I really want to run it for you.
Well, listener, if you have any final thoughts on Trophy Dark, or any thoughts in general about any of the things we've talked about in season 3 or on this podcast, you could
Or an
probably reach
idea
out
of
to an
a
email.
yeah, an idea of a DM style for us to talk about potentially
Oh,
in next
yeah.
season.
Yeah, that's right. In a future season, what GMing style should we cover that you think deserves more airtime? Jesse, how would they let us know about that?
They would write us at jauntymantis@gmail.com.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, is there anything else that we wanted to cover about Jaunty Mantis TTRPG podcast this episode or next episode? What are we covering for next episode? Transformers?
They are more than meets the eye, and I am so excited to talk about this. Oh my God, I'm so excited to talk about this.
Yeah. Yep. So definitely check in with us for our next episode where we're going to be talking about the Transformers role playing game.
And if you enjoy the podcast, feel free to give us a review on Spotify or Apple Music Tunes stuff. It really helps.
It really helps.
We hear other podcasts say, I don't know if it helps, but
Yeah, I'm kind of torn, right? Because I kind of want this podcast. I think I said this before. Sorry, I'm saying it again, but I kind of want us to be kind of punk rock about it. Like, don't fucking review us. I don't care. We're
I
not
want
asking
that
you for money.
mattress hawking money to buy more game books with. That's
Is that still a thing? Are they still selling Casper mattresses on fucking podcasts?
no, now it's all just like pet insurance, health insurance for pets, and like talk therapy online.
Well, thank goodness for that.
And
Because,
other podcasts with like C tier influencers on, the ACAST network that I'm never going to listen to.
well, I hope we never reach C tier influencer status.
I mean, like we would cut a promo for Jaunty Mandis and be like, "Hey, it's Jesse
And that A.
from the Jaunty Mantis," and we keep it real every week. We talk about dating, pop culture, who's who on the Housewives. Like that's like every promo for every podcast I'm never going to listen to and actually really likely to stop listening to your podcast if
Mhm.
you advertise for those people on your show.
Hell yeah. All right, stretch goal, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we're headed.
I heard one the other day. It's called Better Offline. The dude had this really well thought out rant about why the CEO of Google was evil. Um, and he's just like, these big corporations, blah blah blah, and in the middle there's a commercial for Shell oil. Credibility.
Beautiful. There's no credibility in podcasting. It's a hobbyist platform. All right. Well, listener, look, until next time, get out there, get lost in the forest, you know, find some fucking terrible rat creature with fucking teeth inside of it that's going to haunt your nightmares.
Yeah, if you survive the forest, you don't have to come back. Just stay out there. You're part of it now. We don't go be free. We don't need you or want you back because you're terrifying.
And until then, get out there and play some fucking role-playing games or some shit. This meeting is no longer being recorded.